All right, 3, 2, 1. We are recording. Hello and welcome to the Gonzo Experience Podcast. I am Dave Bomano, your host, and today I have on the show a great guest, Dr. John Torrens. John, or Dr. Torrens, I should say, because you are a university professor. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be here.
Excited to have you here, John. I've been wanting to have you on the show for a while. You're a fellow upstate New Yorker. I'm in Rochester. You're in Syracuse. We have a lot in common. You're more of a university professor than I am. I teach one class at the U of R in entrepreneurship. You much more involved, and you're an entrepreneur, which is great. And you've done a TEDx talk, which I've done as well. So we're kind of like, you're like a much more successful version of me. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
But John, I'm going to read your bio, and then we're going to dig into the topic here, which we're going to talk about your new book, right? Which is called Lightning in a Bottle, How Entrepreneurs Can Harness Their ADHD to Win, which I'm really excited about because I've never been diagnosed, but I feel like I have it. I'll tell you a quick story about that after your bio. So okay. Dr. Torrens is an award-winning professor of entrepreneurial practice and a 2-time Inc. 5000 entrepreneur. He was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult and has experienced both the negative effects as well as the positive effects related to starting and growing a company. He is a healthcare and education entrepreneur with 25 years leading high-growth companies with experience in developing high-performance teams, raising capital, and both on the buy and the sell side of M&As. Dr. Torrens is a faculty member at the Syracuse University Whitman School of Management Department of Entrepreneurship and Emerging Enterprises. He is a frequent guest speaker and executive education instructor in the areas of entrepreneurship, strategy, and corporate innovation. Dr. Torrens is a TEDx speaker. ADHD as an entrepreneur superpower is the name of his TEDx. Is also quoted frequently in the print media, has written several articles, and has delivered multiple presentations on the business of healthcare. He is an active member of Young Presidents Organization, otherwise known as YPO, and has served in multiple volunteer leadership positions, including a term on the International Board of Directors from 2013 to 15. So John, Dr. Torrens, again, welcome to the show. Honored to have you on.
Yeah, thanks, David. Great to be here.
Yeah, you're addressing a topic that I think, like a lot of us entrepreneurs know we have it or think we have it, but we don't really want to talk about that elephant in the room because what does that mean, right? There's people like Dan Sullivan from the Strategic Coach who I think at the age of 60 something finally realized he was ADHD and started taking Adderall, and it's worked for him. It's calmed him down. It's focused him. I, on the other hand, I read the side effects of that. I don't know if I would like it. Right. So to each their own. If it works for him, great. I'm not sure if I'm going to do something like that, but I'm sure we'll talk about that more. I totally want to dig into your thoughts about ADHD and all your research and your TEDx talk and now your book. But I want to tell you a quick little story that might make you laugh. So, I'm a child of the 80s and really was let's see, when I was about 6, right? It was 1975. And we lived, I'm born in Rochester, but my dad worked for Kodak. We moved to Atlanta, Georgia for a while when I was a kid. And according to my parents, I was unbearably hyper, right? They couldn't even go out to dinner. I would like run away. And I was just that hyperactive kid that drove people nuts. And so they took me to a doctor. And I remember this years later, and I confronted my mom about it. And she's like, "You remember that? Oh my God." But what happened was, brought me to the doctor, and the doctor put all these, taped all these wires to my head, right? I remember this. I'm laying down, and he told me to go to sleep, and I could not fall asleep. And I remember him getting frustrated with me, right? That I couldn't fall asleep. And I guess I finally did. And the prognosis was, some form of hyperactivity, my parents tell me now. And they had recommended some drug to give me that was, I'm assuming it was some like pre-experimental Ritalin type of drug, right? And to my parents' credit, they got a little nervous and did not do it, right? They said, "Well, we'll just deal with him," and they did. And and that was I was 5 or 6 when that happened. I think I was 5 actually. And I remembered it a few years ago. It all of a sudden came back to me, and I asked my mom about it, and she was like, "We thought you forgot about that, and we just didn't know what to do with you." So I haven't been tested since, but probably have some form of it myself. As you say, a lot of entrepreneurs have ADHD. So enough about me. Let's talk about it. ADHD, is it a benefit? Is it a detriment? Is it both? And I'm kind of queuing up your TEDx talk, right? So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks for that. Well, so the short answer is that it's both, and that it depends on context. So an example I like to use is one of my colleagues at the university. His name's Johan, and Johan he's a prolific entrepreneurship researcher. He's the one who got me into this study of ADHD and the link with entrepreneurship. So Johan's 7 feet tall. And if you're 7 feet tall, it's very dysfunctional when you're trying to buy furniture or lay in a bed or something, right? But it's super functional when you're outdoors at a festival or in a crowd, right? So being 7 feet tall could be very dysfunctional, can be very functional. And it's the same with ADHD, although the thing we found is that, so there's two types of ADHD. One is the inattentive type of ADHD where you kind of seem lazy, you forget things, you can't get started, and that could be completely debilitating for a lot of people. The other type of ADHD is hyperactive and impulsive ADHD. And that is the version or the presentation of ADHD that we have found highly correlates with entrepreneurial success. So from your story, it sounds like you fell into that hyperactive, impulsive presentation of ADHD, which does have a lot of really good attributes in the context of entrepreneurship. So, if you think about the different skills that entrepreneurs need to have, right? You need to be constantly on. You've got to think of ideas. You've got to be really brave in the face of people saying no. You've got to be impatient. All these things, they line up really well with a lot of these traits. So the idea is that it's really a spectrum, right? So there's times where impulsivity can be completely disabling or debilitating, right? Like if you just rush and make decisions without thinking them all the way through and regret them later, that's unfortunate. On the other hand, if you're highly impulsive as an entrepreneur, you could capitalize on opportunities faster than the competition or before others do. And so in that way, it could be a benefit, right? So and likewise with all of the different traits in entrepreneurship, whether it's lack of premeditation, whether it's impulsivity, whether it's the impatience, all those types of things sort of conspire to help entrepreneurs if they're harnessed properly. So the trick is to recognize when your traits are being harmful, manage those, and then harness and amplify the traits when they're being helpful and be aware enough to move in that direction on the spectrum of each one of them.
Yeah, very interesting. So tell us about you. So your book right now, we're recording this in mid-January, and it comes out very soon. You can pre-order it on Amazon, right?
Yeah, actually, it's on Amazon now. So the paperback is launched, which is really exciting. And we did a Kindle launch last week, and we hit #1 bestseller in a couple categories already, which is really, really cool. So the message is resonating, which I'm really happy about. And I'm getting a lot of emails and LinkedIn messages and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's really exciting. Yeah, so you can go to Amazon right now and check it out. And actually, Dave, I'll send you a link if you want to share it with your audience. But I've got on but one of the things that I give to people who buy and read the book, just a little free gift. It's a version of the ADHD self-reporting scale that's used by the World Health Organization. So I've kind of reformatted it for people to use, and you can take it yourself and it'll tell you whether or not you have traits consistent with an ADHD diagnosis or not. And then, you can choose to do whatever you want with it from there. So.
John, I'm sorry. I was looking at a squirrel in the window. Can you repeat that?
Yeah.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. So tell us more about the book. What inspired? I mean, obviously your experience inspired you to write it, but can you give us enough meat of the book without giving it away, where we still want to buy it?
No, yeah, of course. It's so the base. It came out of the TED Talk, which came out of the research I did with Johan, which came out of my own experience. So, I've been an entrepreneur most of my adult life. I had a job that I didn't really like and figured I'd go out and, work on my own, and hung a shingle like a lot of people do, and started connecting the dots and hired somebody else and grew it from just me out of my bedroom to 11 locations and $20 million in revenue. But when we were really young, I think I had like 6 employees, maybe a few more than that. But I remember sitting around my conference table and looking at my employees and thinking, oh my God, they trust that I know what I'm doing to pay their mortgages and their bills. And I had this freak out moment where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing here, right? So I got further education and things like that. And then once we started to scale, I I realized that I was having trouble with some of my key people, not because they didn't like me. They actually, I got along with them really well, but I would do things that would absolutely drive them nuts. So for example, as you're scaling a company, you've got to get in, you got to get policies and procedures and processes and sort of systematize things so you can scale comfortably, right? And not have the wheels fall off the bus. So we'd put in all these great policies, procedures, and processes that would help us supposedly scale. And I'll give you one guess of who is the one guy who violated those processes and procedures more than anybody.
That'd be you.
Yeah, it was me all the time, and it would drive people absolutely crazy. Another example is, I remember we had a strategic planning meeting, right? It was a big deal. It was a full day, and we sat down and we, kind of mapped out our strategy. We gave everybody responsibilities. We assigned budget and all this. And we were going, right? And next day, I must have had a great idea that prior evening. And I was just kind of talking to people around the water cooler about it. And I mean, I was so excited about it because, of course, it was the coolest, most exciting idea I had ever had.
Oh, no doubt.
So other people started hearing it and they started freaking out thinking, oh my God, everything we just talked about in our strategy meeting is out the window because we're chasing this shiny object that John has just kind of come up with. And it would cause a lot of difficulty. And I'm highly distractible too. So as a younger guy with a lot on my mind, I'd have meetings with people and I'd be doing anything but paying attention to them and what they were saying, right? I'd be checking I had a really cool BlackBerry at the time, right? So I'd be checking my BlackBerry, I'd be wondering what's for lunch, I'd be looking at my emails and then sort of pretending to pay attention, not because I didn't care or value them. I just could not control the stimuli that I was receiving and manage it. So things like that. So people who were really good in my organization did amazing work. We were starting to get some friction. And I was working with a business coach at the time who recommended that, hey, maybe you should just go get evaluated. So I went and saw a psychiatrist, put me through this long evaluation process. And, of course, at the end of the day, he said, yeah, you've got impulsive hyperactive ADHD. You didn't develop it as an adult. Chances are you've had it since you were a kid. And one of the parts of the process was, I had to write to my parents and get all my old report cards from my elementary school teachers. And we'd go through the report cards and it was, John has so much potential if he would just apply himself, or, he gets his work done really fast and then he starts bugging all the other kids so they can't get their work done, or he just blurts out answers in class without raising his hand. And, the doctor's like, yeah, you've had ADHD your entire life. And now it's just sort of starting to cause problems that you notice. So, like you said, he recommended a few meds. I tried a few and they didn't work for me. The side effect, I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, I felt wired and jittery all the time. And I just didn't think that I was myself. So, I started to compensate and manage it in other ways. But yeah, that's the basic idea for, how the book came to be. So then through the research that I was involved with and my own experience and the research I did for the TED Talk, I started to come up with these or find all of these really new, amazing studies linking ADHD, at least the hyperactive and impulsive version of it, to entrepreneurial success. So I started interviewing entrepreneurs. We did an actual survey of entrepreneurs and found that in our sample, 62% of these people had traits consistent with an ADHD diagnosis, which is incredible because in the general population, it's about 11 or 12. So this highly successful entrepreneur sample was just chock full of people with raging ADHD, and they were quite successful, right? But for all of the good that came with these traits and these character traits they had, they would drive people nuts in their organization. So the question was, well, how can we get them to harness this? I mean, if they're doing well now, what would it take to get them to harness all the good qualities they have while they manage all the problematic qualities, and could they achieve even more? And what we're finding is that, yeah, by managing the downside, amplifying the upside, there's a lot to be gained. And that's why I wrote the book.
I'm listening to you, and you probably heard me chuckle a couple of times, not because I'm laughing at you, I'm laughing with you, because my previous company was a national magazine for high school students, and we were in Inc. 5,000 company a few times, and all this. So I had about 15 people working for me, and I would drive them nuts. I was like the director of Whiplash, they would call me, and we brought in a consultant to, just like you did, kind of establish some strategy and policies and procedures and structure, which certainly goes against my grain, but I was willing to do it, had to do it, right? And but became of that was they the coach that we hired convinced everybody, including me, that we had to form a task force. It was an R&D task force that, and I wasn't on it. And this task force had the authority to review and approve or decline all my new ideas, because same thing, we would do a strategic, retreat, come up with like, 2, 3, big rocks for the year. And we were focused on that and committed. And then a month later, just like you, I'm at the water cooler, like, oh guys, what if we do this too,
Right.
and I would drive them insane. So they formed this task force. It was called the R&D task force. And it, obviously supposed to be research and development, but they would kill every one of my new ideas, right? So I started calling it the research and destroy task force. But they were correct. They were right. And so I feel like we share some similar personality traits, and I think I'm going to go get tested too, just to deny or confirm if I have ADHD.
Well, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical doctor, Dave, but I can diagnose you without diagnosing you, I think, right now.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I'll save the money. So I watched your TEDx talk, and it's fantastic. Thanks for doing that. And I want to explore some of the things you talked about, because you with some research and some graphs that illustrate it, you show us some of how ADHD, truly is a superpower when it comes to being an entrepreneur, creativity, et cetera. But you also show, again, with some research and graphs, how, we're prone to more personality traits and even some ailments, right? Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit more about those pros and cons, I guess, if you will?
Yeah, sure. So like you mentioned, there's a lot of upside, right? The people in the research that I was involved with, they outperformed their competition. They were more likely to be serial entrepreneurs. They had higher growth rates in sales and revenue and profitability. They had more innovative cultures in their companies. But what we also found was that they also had higher instances of things like anxiety, depression, substance abuse, things like that. So there's this darker underside. So, you see people see the entrepreneur who's super successful and takes these great risks and is always on and, all that. But a lot of them are struggling inside or secretly or silently. And it's one of the things that we don't see. So the idea of amplifying the upside while managing the downside is really important, because the more you can manage the downside, or if somebody is struggling with clinical depression, getting them the help, or if they do have anxiety, getting them somebody who can help them with that, so you can get that out of the way, so all of these gifts can truly shine. That's what my work has been focused on.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I'm sure Cameron Herold, who's a big EO and YPO speaker.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And he's a friend of mine. And Cameron, he gave a talk about how behind the curtain, a lot of many successful entrepreneurs who, like you said, look like they have the world by the what, but behind the curtain, they're really depressed, and many are even suicidal. And so I think the big question is, based on your experience and research, what can us, these entrepreneurs, the ADHD entrepreneurs, do to kind of, combat those areas where we could fall in a ditch, right? Are there some things that we can do? And like I said, if people want to take medication, that's your choice. That's, I'm not going to judge. It's great. But for someone like me who doesn't want to go down that path, or sounds like you, what are some things that ADHD entrepreneurs can do to really quiet some of the storm and ignite some of the positive attributes?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, and one of the things I'm focused on. So one of the tips I actually got from Cameron. So one of the things I heard him speak at an event, and he was like, "How many of you, go to bed with your phone at your bedside table and leave it on and check it in the morning before you even get out of bed?" Actually, I think he said either you check it before you pee or while you're peeing, or something like that, right? When you wake up. And a lot of us were like, yeah, we kind of do that. So one of the things that I started doing, which came right from him, was I just turn it in airplane mode and I leave it out of reach at night. So I can't pick it up even if I wake up. So that's one small thing, but it boils down to this idea of your activity and your consumption, right? And so activity in terms of what you're doing with your body and what you're doing professionally, and then consumption, what you're taking into your body through your mouth, but also through your eyes and ears. So let's first talk about activity. So for me, there's a lot of research to support this, but some sort of movement or exercise daily, super important for people with ADHD because it releases endorphins. It does a lot of really good things that are helpful for people who have ADHD. So exercise, I know everybody says exercise for everything, but truly there's a lot of research to support that will definitely help you and kind of center you and focus you a little bit. The other thing in terms of activity is what you do professionally. So a lot of entrepreneurs, especially we're in that early stage of the life cycle of an entrepreneur where the ADHD traits are super helpful, they can get blocked or hung up in doing all the things they have to do, even if they don't like them, right? So I was working with one woman who just hated preparing slides, but she was the founder CEO of a company out to do a capital raise, and she had to revise her pitch deck all the time. Hated it, never did it, never got to it. When she did do it, it was terrible. People would give her crap about it. And this one little thing, the fact that she had to revise some slides, kept her from doing all sorts of other things because she had this guilt and self-loathing about the fact that she couldn't do it. Until I said, well, you could go on Fiverr or Upwork and hire somebody to do your slides for like $50 or something like that. And she was able to do that. So are you engaging in activities that are in your strike zone, that doing things that you're good at, or are you trying to do things that you kind of stink at, that you don't like at anyway, and you're kind of feeling guilty, right? So that's the activity part. So just focusing on those. Consumption is the big one. So what you take into your body through your mouth first. There's very little research to support that adding things to your diet will help you with ADHD. However, there's a lot of research that shows things you eliminate from your diet can help. So obvious things like minimizing caffeine or using it strategically, sugars, red dye, oddly enough, is one thing that if you eliminate that, it'll help a lot. And there's other things you can do too. And if you're going to go down the nutrition route, definitely probably a good idea to talk to a professional. Managing your alcohol, there's no support for alcohol in terms of managing your ADHD symptoms. A lot of people I work with, they drink a lot, especially at night, because they say it helps them fall asleep because their mind's always going and racing, and they think the booze helps them sleep. In fact, it just disrupts their sleep and it doesn't really help them. So things like that. In terms of the other part of consumption, what you're taking into your eyes and ears, are you the entrepreneur that has, your WhatsApp for web going, your stock ticker, your Outlook, and, social media? You have like 3 or 4 screens, and the thing that pops up is the thing that commands your attention right then, right? Or do you wake up in the morning and before your eyes are completely open, you've got your phone and you're scrolling through all your messaging apps, seeing, okay, what's going on today? What do I have to do, right? So are you consuming media and information as well as food and drink in a way that's helpful or harmful? And it's really so simple in concept, right? But it's very hard to change a lot of these habits, especially in terms of the media and information consumption, because this is the world we live in, right? We consume media, but the degree to which you can manage that effectively, like, so what I do now, I don't have Outlook open all day. I close it, and in the morning I wake up, I take 30 minutes where I don't even touch my phone. And when I do touch my phone, I look and I kind of go through based on what I've planned for that day. So, those are really important things. So are you that person who looks at your phone right away and doesn't strategically sit down and plan over 30 minutes what you're going to do? Or do you just kind of react to everything that comes in?
Very helpful. I think we could do a whole podcast just on that piece alone. Things that you can do to quell the inner ADHD, right? And
Yeah.
and that's interesting about what it's not about mostly about what you put in your mouth, but what you don't put in. That's a great twist to the thought pattern of that. And red dye, you're talking about like stuff that's put in, like processed foods and things like that.
Yeah, Doritos, whatever it is. Yeah, which, I was kind of surprised at, but the more you read it and you go down that rabbit hole, it's, there's a lot of science to support that this is just going to be enough to activate the parts of your brain that you maybe don't want to activate as much because they're already pretty active. You need to do other things. So the other thing that I didn't mention is some sort of mindfulness practice. A lot of support and research for mindfulness. So and especially if you have inattentive ADHD, which is the ADHD that isn't really correlated with entrepreneurial success as much. But if you can focus on mindfulness practice, that it's kind of like you're paying attention to how you pay attention. right? So just paying attention to your breath, starting with a short 4 to 6 minute meditation, moving up to 10. And the people I work with, I encourage them to do it in the morning during that 30-minute block where they're not touching their phones, right? They're getting up, making their tea or coffee, doing a little stretching, just kind of, getting ready for the day. And then, doing a little mindfulness. There's a lot of research to show that that's pretty helpful.
Yeah. I've had a lot of people on my show talk about breathing, deep breathing and meditation. So, even if like you said, if it's 3 to 5 minutes of just doing some deep breathing exercises, it definitely calms me down. And I know it calms other people down as well.
Yeah. So one more thing, the other thing you mentioned, the team, your R&D committee. That's another really important thing, is to engage your key relationships, right? So your spouse, your significant other, your number two in your organization, or your management team, giving them the vocabulary and the language and the permission to flag you or call you out or say, hey, Dave, I think that's a little crazy, or that's really not what we talked about, or that's outside the scope, or form a committee, right? And sort of kill your crazy ideas before they can cause damage, or be able to identify the ideas that maybe are crazy but could actually do some good for the organization. That's a really important thing to add to your life as an entrepreneur in terms of things you can do to help yourself. Because as the entrepreneur with ADHD, you're the most important one in driving what we call entrepreneurial orientation, or EO. And the research shows that EO leads to companies with more innovative cultures, higher sales growth, more profitability. And three of the things that lead to higher EO in the company are the founders, impulsivity, hyperactivity, and propensity for risk, which is pretty interesting. So if you have all those things, which are common in ADHD, you're going to have higher EO in the company, and you're going to be more innovative and more profitable and things like that. So it's important that you don't surround yourself with people who are going to tamp that down all the time, but sort of act as your regulators, right? And say, Dave, that's crazy. We can't do that, right? But they can look at you and say, that's crazy, but we should do that, or that sort of thing. Being able to surround yourself with people who understand you and have the permission to call you out and help you manage the downside while allowing the upside to flourish.
Hey, John, this has been super fantastic. As a kindred spirit brother of yours, I could talk to you forever, but really, really appreciate your time on the show today. And once again, I'm going to plug you. Everybody, just look up Dr. John Torrens in Google TEDx Dr. John Torrens. He'll come up. Great. I think it's exactly 15 minutes of a TEDx talk, and then also to order his book, Lightning in a Bottle. How entrepreneurs can harness their ADHD to win. And your TEDx talk is actually called ADHD as an Entrepreneur's Superpower. So you can Google that as well. So John, if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about you, where do they go?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn, John M. Torrens. They can send me an email, jtorrens, JTORRENS @syr.edu.
Excellent. Thanks again, John. Dr. Torrens, truly appreciate it. Keep on doing your great work, and send me that test. I want to take it.
You got it, Dave. I'll do it right now.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, Gonzo listeners. Appreciate you. Wishing you all a massively great day. And don't forget to stay awesome.